Have you ever imagined being face to face with evil disguised as kindness? How would you react? And even more, what would you do if you could learn to protect your soul from the most subtle traps with which it tries to deceive? Today, I bring you an extraordinary revelation about an event that shook the life of Padre Pio, a moment that shows us the power of true faith against the cunning schemes of evil. This story, safeguarded in the archives of the convent of San Giovanni Rotondo, reveals an encounter that would forever change our understanding of the spiritual battle. If you have ever felt the need for protection and wisdom in these difficult times, this message is for you. And if you feel in your heart the need for a special safeguard, write in the comments, "I need Padre Pio's protection." Sometimes, the most important decisions in life become confusing, and the paths that once seemed clear suddenly become clouded. We ask ourselves why this happens, what invisible force interferes in our choices, diverting us from the purpose we felt so certain about. The words that the enemy confessed that day offer urgent answers in these turbulent times. Get ready to discover one of the most impactful revelations about the enemy's tactics, told through an encounter that transformed the life of Padre Pio and that today may change yours. The convent of San Giovanni Rotondo, nestled in the mountains of Foggia, Italy, was known as a place of miracles and spiritual transformation. Within its ancient halls, Padre Pio dedicated long hours in the confessional, devoting his life to guiding and consoling the souls seeking forgiveness and peace. On that particular day, however, the atmosphere in the convent seemed different. The monks who passed near the confessional noticed a subtle change in the air, as if an unusual presence had crossed the sacred walls. The afternoon sun filtered its light through the stained glass windows, casting shadows that seemed to move with a life of their own. From early in the morning, Padre Pio had begun his routine of hearing confessions. His hands, marked with the stigmata, held the crucifix with devotion as he attentively listened to each penitent. His ability to read souls was well known. Many testimonies spoke of how he could see beyond words, perceiving hidden intentions and spiritual struggles invisible to others. A line of penitents stretched down the convent corridor, made up of people from different backgrounds and social classes, all waiting patiently for their turn. Some had been waiting for hours. Others had traveled great distances with the sole purpose of confessing to the saintly Capuchin. A solemn atmosphere of prayer and contemplation reigned. It was then that the man appeared. His mere presence caused an immediate change in the surroundings. He was dressed in an impeccably tailored black suit, refined and elegant, an unusual attire among the convent's regular visitors. His distinguished demeanor and the confidence with which he moved were striking. But the most unsettling aspect was his gaze, a piercing look that seemed to reach into the very depths of the soul of anyone who crossed his path. What was even more disconcerting was his ability to advance through the line without anyone seeming to notice or protest. He glided naturally, moving ever closer to Padre Pio's confessional as if he possessed the ability to turn invisible at will. Inside the confessional, Padre Pio began to experience a growing unease. Throughout his ministry, he had learned to recognize the signs of the extraordinary, those subtle indications that preceded the most momentous encounters. The scent of roses, which often emanated from his stigmata, intensified, a phenomenon that usually accompanied moments of profound spiritual significance. The friars who knew him well noticed a change in his demeanor. His expression, usually serene, took on an unusual concentration, and his prayers between confessions became more intense, as if he were preparing for something of great importance. As the man in the black suit continued to approach, the atmosphere in the convent grew dense. Some of the faithful later recalled feeling an inexplicable chill despite the usual warmth of the region. Others claimed that the church candles flickered even though there was no draft. But Padre Pio did not allow anything to interrupt his work. Each confession was attended to with the same dedication as always, with that infinite patience that characterized him. Even so, within him, his spirit remained alert, preparing for an encounter he sensed to be out of the ordinary. The sun was beginning to set when the man in black finally reached the door of the confessional. The light from the stained glass windows, which until that moment had illuminated the interior of the convent, seemed to avoid his figure, casting a shadow darker than usual. At that instant, Padre Pio understood that what was about to happen would forever change his understanding of the enemy's tactics. When the mysterious man entered the confessional, Padre Pio immediately sensed that something was different. At first glance, the penitent seemed like any other, a man with a soft, educated voice who spoke with an almost hypnotic calm. But there was something in his words that carried an unsettling weight. "Father, I have come to confess," he began, with impeccable courtesy. "But first, I would like to share some reflections on the nature of sin and salvation." His tone was almost seductive, laden with a logic that challenged traditional teaching. "Don't you think the church is too strict in its teachings? After all, God gave us free will to enjoy all the pleasures of life." His voice was enveloping, with a cadence that invited doubt. Padre Pio, without showing any reaction, listened attentively. It was not the first time he had encountered arguments of that kind, but something about this conversation was different. The man continued with a carefully crafted discourse, mixing half-truths with misleading reasoning. "Look, Father, how the world has changed. Should we not adapt our beliefs to modern times? Truth, after all, is relative." As he spoke, the persuasion in his voice became more intense. "Sin," he continued with an air of conviction, "is nothing more than an outdated social construct." But while the visitor expressed his ideas with almost impenetrable certainty, Padre Pio began to notice something unusual. The crucifix he held in his hands grew heavier, as if its spiritual weight had suddenly become tangible. The fragrance of roses, which normally emanated from his stigmata, vanished, replaced by a harsh and unpleasant odor. At that moment, the saintly Capuchin began to see beyond the visitor's elegant appearance. "Why maintain these outdated restrictions?" the man insisted. "People should be free to seek their own truth, to define their own morality. Isn't that more authentic than following rules imposed by others?" His words were sweet, like a poison designed to sow doubt and confusion. However, Padre Pio, who had remained silent until then, perceived with absolute clarity the true nature of this man. These were not just mistaken ideas or intellectual challenges. These words were the very same temptations he had heard countless times in the confessional, but this time they came directly from their original source. The desire for power, the pursuit of riches, the temptations of the flesh. Aren't these natural gifts we should embrace? The visitor continued, with a smile that seemed to already know all the answers. Guilt and remorse are chains that prevent us from reaching our true potential. In that moment, illuminated by grace, Padre Pio saw with absolute clarity the identity of his interlocutor. That man, with his distinguished demeanor and persuasive rhetoric, was nothing more than a carefully crafted mask. He concealed the ancient enemy, who, in his arrogance, had dared to reveal to him in person his most effective strategies. "See how humanity progresses when it frees itself from these moral restrictions," the adversary continued, unaware that he had been discovered. "True freedom lies in accepting all our desires without judging them. Isn't that more honest than pretending to follow outdated norms? Padre Pio, strengthened by years of prayer and penance, listened to each word with the serenity of one who had been prepared for battle. In every argument from the visitor, he could identify the enemy's tactics, the distortion of truth, the justification of sin, the relativization of morality, the exaltation of pleasure above virtue. The world has changed, insisted the visitor with conviction. With it, our understanding of good and evil should also change. Each person has their own truth. But the truth he proclaimed was a carefully crafted lie designed to sow confusion. Padre Pio, who had listened without interruption until that moment, felt that the moment of final revelation was approaching. He had remained in constant prayer throughout the conversation, accumulating spiritual strength for what was about to happen. It was then that he noticed a change in the penitent's voice. At first, the shift was almost imperceptible, a strange vibration that did not seem human. Then, it transformed into a torrent of accusations, blasphemies, and confusion. In a moment of carelessness, the visitor let slip a disturbing truth. "I am the enemy," he confessed with a tone of resentment. "But I have come because I cannot stand your presence or that of your God." The air inside the confessional grew heavy, as if the atmosphere itself had changed. "Do you know why I am so successful, Friar?" he continued with contempt. "Because I don't need people to commit great sins. I only need to plant small doubts, create small justifications. Confusion is my best weapon." He made a vague gesture with his hand, as if pointing to something invisible. "Look at the modern world," he said with mockery. "I no longer need grand temptations. Constant distraction, moral relativism, the insatiable pursuit of pleasure and comfort. These are my most effective instruments." Padre Pio did not waver. He maintained his firm posture, facing the adversary's revelation with serenity. "I make them believe that I do not exist," the visitor continued with a cold laugh. "I whisper to them that everyone can create their own truth. I convince them that sin is freedom and that virtue is slavery." But as he spoke, the mask of the penitent began to crumble. His face lost its elegant composure. His voice, once smooth and persuasive, turned into a roar of repressed hatred. The encounter was reaching its climax. Padre Pio, with the certainty of one who had seen the enemy in all his forms, prepared to deliver the final blow. The penitent's face twisted into a grimace of disdain when he realized his disguise had been uncovered. His voice, once soft and persuasive, became harsh and filled with resentment. "So, you have been able to see through my disguise, saint of the stigmata," he growled with restrained fury. But Padre Pio, with the serenity that characterized him, replied without hesitation, "Your presence here only proves your weakness before the power of truth and mercy. For every soul you try to confuse, God's grace is even stronger." The enemy, enraged by these words, let out one last and revealing statement. "My greatest triumph is not convincing people to do evil immediately. No, what truly makes me powerful is making them postpone their conversion. Tomorrow I will be better. There is still time to change. God will understand." These are the most subtle chains with which I trap souls. Padre Pio, raising his crucifix firmly, interrupted him. "Your strategies are exposed before the light of truth. Every word you have spoken today will serve as a warning to those who seek the right path." The visitor, aware that his time in that place was running out, issued a final threat. "You may have unmasked me today, Friar, but I will continue working in the shadows. I will sow doubts, create confusion. There will always be weak souls who will fall for my whispers." But Padre Pio was not intimidated. With the calm and strength of one who lives in constant union with God, he responded with authority. If you are here, it is because God has allowed it. Confess and depart. You have no power here. At that moment, the penitent, now fully unmasked, let out a hollow laugh that echoed through the confessional, a laughter that filled the air with a sudden chill. The darkness seemed to thicken around him for an instant, and without leaving a trace, he vanished. The faithful who were in the church immediately felt a change in the atmosphere. Some claimed that the peace felt that day was more intense than ever, as if Padre Pio's intervention had been yet another victory in the spiritual battle he constantly waged. That encounter left behind fundamental lessons to protect ourselves in these times. It showed us that the enemy does not always present himself in an obvious way, with visible threats or direct temptations. No, his most dangerous weapon is confusion, the subtle manipulation that leads us to grant small indulgences, to make seemingly harmless concessions that gradually take us away from the right path. Padre Pio taught us that the best defense is to maintain a firm faith and a clear mind, because when we allow doubt to infiltrate our hearts, when we begin to question fundamental truths, we are opening a dangerous door. The enemy's words revealed his primary strategy: to make people believe that truth is relative, that there are no immutable principles, that everyone can create their own morality. This is precisely why Padre Pio insisted so much on the importance of daily prayer and the firmness of our convictions. As he often said, "Pray, hope, and do not worry." In today's world, these teachings are more relevant than ever. We live in an era where truth seems to blur, where each person claims to build their own moral code without any reference. The enemy knows this and uses this confusion to draw souls away from the light. The most effective protection, Padre Pio taught us, does not lie in grand gestures or complex rituals. What truly matters is consistency in prayer, the determination to stand firm in our faith, and clarity in our purpose. The tactics revealed in that confessional remind us that the enemy operates with patience, slowly infiltrating our decisions. He makes us believe that a small compromise is unimportant, that a slight deviation from the path will have no consequences. But as Padre Pio warned us, those small detours can irreversibly lead us away from our destiny. To remain steadfast, Padre Pio left us 3 essential pieces of advice. First, lead a life of constant prayer, because only through connection with God can we strengthen our soul. Second, do not allow doubt to erode our convictions. Faith is not something that adapts to the times, it is an eternal truth. And third, seek clarity in the midst of confusion, because the enemy feeds on uncertainty and distraction. When we feel doubts beginning to whisper within us, when the world makes us think that everything is relative, let us remember these teachings. Truth does not change with the times or with human trends. What is right has always been right and will always be. If this message has touched your heart, if these revelations can help others, share it. The words of Padre Pio, his teachings, and his example of steadfastness are more necessary than ever in this time of uncertainty. Remember, the most dangerous enemy is not the one who shows himself openly, but the one who works in the shadows, sowing doubt and confusion. Keep your faith strong, your mind clear, and your heart open to the truth. As Padre Pio taught us, victory is assured for those who remain faithful. Write in the comments, "Thank you, Padre Pio, for your protection." If these teachings have illuminated your path and strengthened your faith, share this message with those who need to hear this truth. Do not forget to subscribe to our channel to receive more messages of hope and wisdom from Padre Pio, the saint who faced the enemy face to face and left us the tools to remain firm in our faith.